Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Ben Crossman, and I hope all of you are having a great day because, and this is one of those shows where when we don't do them, because we have a lot of kind of regulars here on the program where we talk about gaming or consumer electronics or graphics, and I believe deep in your hearts that you love them as much as you would anyone else. But when we don't do our Linux segment or we delay it for any reason, you guys get angry, you get rabid. And so we have to sue the savage beast that is you. And we have one of our regulars here, which is Marcel Gagne with our Cooking with Linux segment. So that is, and this segment is dedicated to all you Linux fans or all of you Linux curious. And, hey, we have a lot of great topics today. So before we get started, a couple of things, including ComputerAmerica.com. That's where you'll find everything from, today's show notes, which will include a link to our guest website, as well as any articles, videos, and social media that we may mention here on the program. So there's that. There's also going to be, the contest brought to you by Logitech, giving that away on social media, and the video feed, which is brought to you by OWC. So all of that and more at Computer America. Check that out. We have a couple of reviews in the can. We just reviewed a drone. I know we have one for like a canless air system, so I'm sure all of you bought those dusters for like $10 for like 3 of them. This is one unit that replaces I think 10,000 of those. So pretty cool. Looking forward to it. So that and more at Computer America. But why don't we go ahead and just get started? So as I said, Cooking with Linux, Marcel Gagne, and this is going to be everything about Linux. So let's just say hi, Marcel. How you doing? Welcome onto the program.
Hi, and I have to apologize. It's my fault. I went away on holidays, and I went on holidays. I actually had holidays, but I went away on holidays, and of course we do this like every third Thursday, and I know this shouldn't be confusing, but there's something about trying to figure out which Thursday of the month is the third Thursday, especially since sometimes it looks like it's only like 2 weeks in, when the month starts early on a Thursday. Mm-hmm. I know I'm making excuses here, dang it, but
yeah, I'm not going to blame you for going on vacation. It's perfectly okay, and just don't do it again.
You say that now.
Right, but in the meantime, why don't we go ahead and just get started? Give us a bit of your background, and tell us all about you. Who is the Marcel?
Oh, who the heck am I? Oh, I'm a Linux. I've been doing Linux stuff for a long time now. I started out. Actually, I was working for a computer company at the time. Is really how it all started out, and they introduced me to something called Unix back then, and then a few years later, I discovered something called Linux, and this was just in 1992. Given that Linux first made its appearance back in 1991. I was sort of what you might call a really early adopter. And I just got hooked on the whole idea of a completely open source operating system and something that was insanely powerful that you could do, things other than running DOS batch files, because we're talking like the days of DOS batch files here. And I was hooked. And by 1994, I was running Linux as my desktop operating system. When most people didn't actually even have a desktop computer yet, I was already running Linux as a desktop operating system, and the love affair has been going on since then. I still love Linux. I still love working with it. I still love playing with it. I do obviously, besides doing the show with Computer America, I do YouTube videos on this. I've written, hundreds and hundreds of articles over the years, and I've written 6 books on Linux and open source. So that's me. other than that, I'm just your basic Linux science and technology geek who's seriously opinionated on, maybe one or two things.
Yeah, no, which we have found out. But later on in the program, as I understand it, we're also going to talk about your first podcast, or at least your first podcast interview. Not just you talking into the abyss, but you talking with an actual guest. So
I just want to point out that you and I have both been threatening this for a long time, and.
Yeah. No, but hey, it's a big first step, and I'm looking forward to talking about all this with you today. So, and by the way,
shall we start with the wine?
Actually, I'm going to start with the show notes. So, the show notes in general, they're a really important part for every show, but Marcel really goes out of his way to make really great show notes for today, which include, pretty much a syllabus for today's show. So if anything here interests you, including the wine of the day, which we'll do in just a second, it's going to be right there in the show notes. So, but Marcel, go ahead. Why don't we start with the wine of the day, and what do you have?
Let's start with the wine of the day. Actually, I did I mention that I was away on holidays?
You did.
Okay, well, last week, actually, I spent 2 weeks last month. I was away during the time when we should have been doing the Computer America show, mm-hmm. and I apologize. It's my fault. I may I'll be a despite being an atheist, I'll be a good ex-Catholic and go mea culpa, mea culpa. It's my fault. Anyway, so while I was away, I was at this resort in the Muskokas, which is kind of like it's one of the cottage country areas in Ontario. And it's a beautiful area. It's like they've got a place called 30,000 Islands up there, which is like it's dotted with all these little lakes and little islands everywhere. It's absolutely gorgeous. Anyway, so I was at this resort, and like within walking distance of the resort, there was an LCBO, which is important. I just want to say that, LCBO is the liquor store. The Liquor Control Board of Ontario. And I walked in there and I said, make a suggestion, because it's a smaller store, so they don't have the selection that I'm used to. And of course, every store, while they have some of the same brands, there are some things that you don't find everywhere. So it's a smaller store. So I said, make a suggestion, and she suggested this one. Okay, now the people who are going to look at the video are going to see the label, which is really, really cool. It's kind of an Adam and Eve theme on the label, and it's called Inception, and this is a South African wine, Cape Heritage. And Inception is, in a word, fantastic. It's a blend of 3 different wines. It's a Shiraz, it's a Petit Verdot, if I remember correctly, and a Mourvèdre, I think, is the third one. And it's a blend. It's what you'd call an off-dry, because it's not seriously dry. I mean, I'm a huge fan of dry wines, but this one is more of an off-dry. And man, is it good! I mean, this is like now one of my favorite wines. And I had never heard of it, so I thank this lovely person who works at the LCBO. She was like right on top in terms of making a suggestion, and it's just really good. It's multi-layered. It's like deep cherry, blueberry, like every dark berry you can think of sort of makes its appearance. Got a little bit of chocolatiness to it. It would probably go awesome with chocolate, and I highly recommend it. Inception, South African wine. And I guess that's one of the things that sort of amazes me, because I'm usually pretty so-so on South African wines, but this one is like, top notch. So highly recommend it. That's the wine. That's the wine for today, and that's what I'm drinking today.
Yeah, cheers. And I guess as someone who's really not into wine, I never really consider South Africa to be on the wine scene, but
they most definitely are. It's a question of whether. It's not a question of whether they're on the wine scene so much as whether it's your thing. I mean, right. People do appreciate wines from different regions, and not every wine region is fantastic. I mean, like France and Italy obviously are very well known wine regions, as is Australia these days. But that doesn't mean that every wine from that region is fantastic. So, you still have to pick and choose no matter what.
You say Australia, and that's the one I go to where I think, they have a lot of sour wine, and it's just not my cup of wine. It's just...
Yeah. Again, you gotta pick and choose your stuff. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Oh, and by the way, I mean, if you want, I'll just throw one out there for the people in the U.S. Okay, because I don't know. I don't know how easy this one's going to be to find, but I found another one, which is actually a California wine called Red Velvet Cupcake, which is almost, which is like, who doesn't like red velvet cupcakes? Come on. But it's definitely in the same ballpark in terms of being kind of awesome. And I had that one while I was on holidays as well, although I wasn't going to make it my wine of the day. But
right.
If you're an American, and you're in, whatever the equivalent of your liquor store down there is, and they don't have Inception, then look for Red Velvet Cupcake.
Right. And yeah, absolutely. So very, very cool wine. And again, I really do like the artwork. They, have really, really cool stuff. So
it's lovely. It's really, really lovely because, what would the Garden of Eden, how good would the Garden of Eden be if it didn't have decent wine?
Absolutely. So, and for Ben's drink of the day, Monster 0 Calorie Zero Ultra with no nutritional value whatsoever, yet still a lot of liquid. So I don't know what's going on, but
are you even old enough to drink yet? I mean,
ouch. That's
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
That's one of those things that my parents still promise me. It's like, Ben, you're getting carded when you're 27. When you're 35, you're going to be thanking your lucky stars that you have that baby face. And I'm like, yeah, but it's not helping me out now. It is what it is. But
for the record, there's a and I realize we always digress on this show, so I apologize. But I have a friend of mine who's as old as I am. He's actually only a year younger than me. And like the man still has a baby face. He's like, some people just never seem to outgrow this baby face. It's just bizarre, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it happens. But yeah, so we do digress because we're not talking about my rosy cheeks. We are talking about news, rumors, conspiracy theories. Some of and of course you have some of these up here that you mentioned are not Linux oriented, but I don't see any here. Did you pick any or?
Okay, well, I'm gonna give you one. The Debian project. Actually, this goes into my Linux distribution focus.
Okay.
The Debian distribution, which is Debian.org, is I went and I was going in and checking out my links on this, but we'll talk about the distribution focus a little bit later there. But the Debian, which is kind of the distribution on which, it's not kind of, it is the distribution on which Ubuntu is based. And of course, Ubuntu is probably the best known Linux distribution out there. Next to Red Hat. I mean, if you're talking about something for the desktop, Red Hat is what people think of in terms of what's in the server room. Okay, so I mean, if you go to a big company and what they have in the back room where they run their email systems, where they run their database, all that sort of stuff, like an Oracle database. If they're running an Oracle database, odds are they're running it on a Red Hat Linux system. I mean, they're kind of the big corporate operating system. And on the desktop, although a lot of people like Linux Mint, the Mint is really hot. Mint is also based on the Debian operating system, by the way. Ubuntu is kind of the poster child of desktop Linux these days. And it is turning 10 years old, or it has turned 10 years old. So there you go. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, what am I saying? Not 10, 25 years old. Debian has turned 25. I'm not sure where I just got 10 from. has turned 25 years old. Okay, never mind. Brain fart for a second there.
So, no problem. But I was about to say 10 years. That's pretty new. But 25.
No, 25.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Sorry, 25 years old. It has turned 25 years old. It's been around for a heck of a long time. And it's worth mentioning because, like I said, one of the distributions I wanted to talk about is based on that as well. But one of the things that's interesting about Debian is Debian is also one of the ones that is very popular in the server room, although it's not quite as corporate-ish, if you'll pardon the expression. Red Hat has really gone after the corporate market, has really gone after the support, for instance. So large companies will pay Red Hat, and that's why Red Hat makes a lot of money, by the way. They'll go to companies and they provide not only the operating system, but they also provide 24/7 support and installation support, training, like everything that you'd expect from a big computer organization is provided by Red Hat, and they're kind of the darling of the corporate world. Debian is also used by servers, but you'll find that it tends to be people who run their own department. So like your regular run-of-the-mill, if you'll pardon the expression, systems administrator will run Debian. And what Debian has going for it, like Red Hat, is how can I put this? A reputation for stability. Okay, there's no fancy stuff. It's not going to be the latest and greatest. It's not going to ride the bleeding edge. They're going to be concentrating on not only stability of the operating system, but security as well. So that's a really big deal with the Debian project. And like I said, the Debian project, not only having turned 25, and you got to remember, this is like only a couple of years after Linux first came out, because Linux came out like the first email by Torvalds was August 25th, 1991. Okay. So that's 27 years. We're going to be talking 27 years. And Debian shows up a couple of years later and is still one of the most popular Linux distributions to date. So that's kind of a big deal. And it's definitely worth checking out if you are more. I'm going to step over. I'm stepping on my distribution focus here, but it's worth checking out for people who are really believe in the open source aspect of the philosophy. It's not quite as maniacal about the one that I'm going to talk about later, but it's very true to the open source philosophy. In other words, like concentrating on open source drivers as opposed to binary drivers, which you can download and install for particular systems. So the philosophy is a little bit more pure, and the name, of course, comes from the original creator and his then girlfriend at the time, Deb and Ian. That's where Debian comes from. So there you go, a little bit of background, sort of history.
Right. So and so 25, anyone can get it. I guess
Debian.org. Yeah, Debian.org is the website for it. I'll make sure that it actually shows up in the show notes, because I was foolish enough not to install it there. But yeah, definitely Debian.org.
So one thing that a lot of software runs into is, and I guess operating systems as well, 25 years after the fact, does it still have a place, or
God, yeah. Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, the official, by the way, the official 25 years is today. Just to make that clear, like it's today. So like this is the birthday today. 16th of August. It is the 16th of August, right?
Yes, it is, sir.
Yeah, okay, there it is. So it is actually today. Today is actually the birthday of Debian. So that is actually when it started. But no, it definitely still has a place. I mean, it is hugely popular. It is well supported. It has a huge following. Like I said, it has a huge following in the workplace, in the back room, so to speak, and a lot of people that aren't 100% happy with some of the, if you'll pardon the expression, the corporate tie-ins that Ubuntu has, as popular as Ubuntu is as a Linux distribution. If you're not happy with that corporate tie-in, and I apologize because I thought I took the phone out of this room, so I apologize for that because it's ringing. Anyway, it will stop in a second.
No problem.
I apologize for that. This is one of those things that you worry about all the time when you do these things. Oh God, I hope a phone doesn't ring somewhere in the background. But anyway,
no problem.
So it doesn't have that corporate tie-in. It is very much a community distribution and very much supported by the community. So yeah, it's still a big deal. Debian is a big deal, and the branches of the repositories on which Debian is built is still to this day used for all these other distributions like Ubuntu and like Linux Mint and so forth. So
no, makes perfect sense, and that is one thing that I've really noticed about Linux, and that's going to become very apparent later on in the show notes. Is that the idea of open software means that hey, there's gonna be a lot of forks, a lot of branches, and a lot of different kinds of communities that are gonna put their own flavor to it. So,
okay, and I'll throw another thing out there too. Remember what I said about the more geeky, the less corporate but more geeky side of it?
right.
Okay. I'm almost fighting my own argument here, because one of the biggest users of Debian is actually Google. Um, they have their own spin, so to speak, their own distribution, which is actually based on Debian. So it's not pure Debian, as in they modify it for Google. But there you go. It's actually based on that as well. So yeah, it's very important. It is hugely important.
Right. And, Google only runs the entire world. So it shows you the power of the entire distribution. Exactly. Hail Google. And it's so.
No, don't do that. Don't do that. Cut that out.
Hail as in HAIL, as in the definition, not any other spelling of that word. But yeah, so okay, so Debian, very cool. We were showing the notes, Sarah. You think they put up like a little cupcake or something up on their homepage? They don't have anything. It's sad, but okay.
Well, it's like I said, they're very quiet.
Right.
They don't. There's not a lot of heavy duty marketing behind it. There never has been. It is very much community driven, and I think for some people in the open source community, I think that is part of the attraction, is that it is just this quiet project that goes on and on after all these years, and isn't driven, by advertising, by trying to get more of them out the door, that sort of thing. I think that's I think that's part of it. I think that's part of what makes it a big deal to this day. That, and of course, like I said, its focus on stability and security.
Yeah, I see that. The only thing they have is, at the very bottom are security updates over the past couple of days. So, no, very cool.
It's a very boring website. Go ahead, say it.
I wish they put some clip art in, but they're, hey, you know what? But they fill that space, and that is perfectly okay. So there's that one, and yeah, cheers. 25 years to another 25.
Yeah. Happy birthday, Debian. Happy birthday, Debian.
Happy birthday, Debian. So, all right, so there's that one, and I'll go ahead and let you kind of take it from here. Do you want to go into the topics? Do you have other news?
Yeah. Actually, I want to talk about programming languages, but I wanted to just point out something interesting, which is I've been doing I did a number of articles on Linux gaming for Linux Journal. It's going to be showing up in their next issue that shows up. So yes, I've been pulled out of retirement to write to write articles every once in a while. I've given in after all this time. Anyway, but I did a couple of articles which are on Linux gaming. And the reason I kind of mention that is I've been sort of obsessed with the idea of where we can take games, even in the Linux world. As you know, there's Steam. There are a lot of games that are on Steam that are supported on Steam. And I've been sort of fascinated with the idea of doing some VR type games. And again, I run on a Linux desktop, so I'm not going to go and get things that are Windows based. I'm going to get things that are specifically Linux based. But while I wait for my Steam VR headset, I actually picked up an Oculus Go. And I realize this isn't specifically a Linux topic, other than the fact that Oculus runs on Android. I mean, it's an Android device, right?
Right.
It's a standalone. I don't know I don't know if you know anything about it, or are you familiar with it? The Oculus Go.
The Oculus Go. Oculus Rift, heard plenty about that. The Oculus Go, I think it's kind of a spinoff. Like Samsung has their own, kind of same kind of deal, but uses Samsung phones. But the Oculus Go, that's just kind of like the holder, and then you slip a phone. No. Oh, then I guess I don't know much about it.
You're talking about Gear VR here.
Yeah, Gear VR. No, I guess I really don't know that much about it. It just doesn't get that much attention, I guess.
Okay, I should have brought it with me so that I had it to show you.
Well, I can Google it. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm fascinated by the idea of where we can take things like augmented reality and virtual reality when it comes to our operating systems. And I I do like the fact that there's a lot of development happening on open source type platforms, whether it's Android or whether it's Steam on Linux. And to that end, I actually picked up an Oculus Go because it was the first one that is a completely. I know there's one now from Lenovo as well, but it was the first completely standalone headset. In other words, it doesn't actually require cables running to your computer like it would if I was running Steam games on here. And
a lot of animal lovers who listen to the show are very offended right now because you're talking about cutting tails, and you have to love that VR tail that you get that hooks you up to your computer. But all right, no,
you don't have to. You don't have to love cables, dude. It's the age of wireless. Anyway, so I picked up an Oculus Go, and one of the things I'm interested in doing, and I'll just throw this out here because I want to give myself. I want to force myself to try to do this by next show. Okay, so this is kind of me seeding the future here.
Okay,
I have heard tales of people using interesting external programs to actually use Steam games inside an Oculus Go headset. Okay. And even if that means that I have to root, or hack my Oculus Go headset to try this out, I'm going to try to actually run some Linux Steam games in my 3D VR Oculus Go headsets for the next show. So this is kind of a project for me. But I was just curious, before I jumped into the next thing, if you had actually looked into this at all.
VR comes up once in a while. The Oculus Go, because it's a standalone unit and it's more of a monitor strapped to your face than again something that you buy a $2,000 computer for and run these things in super high quality. I mean, it's again, it doesn't get as much limelight, but we're looking at it on the video portion.
We should do a show on it. We should do a show on it because it's really cool.
VR is one of those things, and we just talked to, let's say, we have guests that come on every once in a while. They're like, VR, here's what we're doing in VR. It's going to take everything by storm. And then a year goes by, and it's like, this year, this is the year that's going to come around.
Games. It's all about the environment. It's all about, I know everybody's trying to come up with like a fancy corporate use for it. And I think that's going to come, by the way, especially with standalone sets. Yeah, with standalone sets like the Go, I think it's going to extend itself even more. In fact, we'll do a show in VR someday.
There you go. No, and let's see. I think the last VR thing we did, we talked to a company called Lucid. They were on a year ago. They came on again. They made a camera that shoots 180 video, so not 360, 180, but it's still enough to create content for VR viewing. And so they were super excited about that, but it's like you said, you have to create the games and the content that people want. But as someone who's tried VR, I think if more people just tried it, if they just strapped the thing to their face and they actually saw what it could do, it would be as entertaining as, let's say, a gaming console sitting there. It has a place. It's just there has to be more content for it, and people have to get their hands on it.
You kind of have to experience it unless you've actually. I've actually shown the Go unit to a couple of people who. And by the way, we'll get back into Linux. I know after the break here, we'll get back into Linux, specifically programming, baby, programming. Mm-hmm. But I have shown it to people where they put on the set and they have no idea what to expect. Like they actually have no concept of what is coming. And once they put it on, it blows their freaking minds. And even if it's just something like you show them Google Earth Street View, where you go down, you have them pick an address or you have them randomly drop to some location in the world. And then you're suddenly turning around and going, oh my God, I am there. I am on that spot. And that in itself is mind blowing. Never mind there are cool games. There are some like fantastic things. Not all of them are great. I mean, there's some real crap. I'll be perfectly honest. First attempts that people just say, "Oh, here it's 3D." Yeah. Well, that's not very exciting. But the concept of being able to visit another part of the world and be there, and then just turn around and look at it, and you're standing in the middle of this place, and you can walk down the street, of a part of the world you would never have gone to. In fact, if you've done, if Street View now even has underwater content where divers have done 360.
They did content of the Great Barrier Reef where you can
Yes,
see it in all of its glory. It's and by the way, the music is playing in the background, but I will just say VR before we get off of it. It has a lot of potential as a touristy kind of thing, sightseeing, as well as an education kind of thing, and a lot more. But at any rate, everyone, we'll be right back. More Computer America, more Cooking with Linux. Marcel Gagne. Everyone, stay tuned.
Greece is cheap.
But the airfare costs a fortune.
Paris?
Not much closer, and again, airfare...
What about Puerto Vallarta?
Let's face it, flying anywhere is just too expensive.
Wait, what's this? Low-cost airlines.
With one call to low-cost airlines, you'll drastically slash your travel costs. We're talking insanely low airline prices to any of your favorite destinations. Where would you like to go? London, Rome, Costa Rica, Australia?
Wow, that's cheap.
So why wait? Call now to learn how crazy cheap it is to fly anywhere in the U.S. or international. Our prices are so low, we can't publish them. The only way to get them is to call to instantly hear the most amazing best deals on airline travel. It's that easy. So call now and start packing.
800-215-4461. 800-215-4461. 800-215-4461. That's 800-215-4461.
And welcome back to the Computer America Show. Short break there, don't worry about it. But everyone, welcome back into the program where we are talking with the one, the only Marcel Gagne with our all Linux Cooking with Linux. And let's see. I'm trying to find the button. There we go. All right. So by the way, the mute button. It's a horrible button. Hey, look what you found. You must have been running. So very cool. So everyone out there watching the video portion, by the way, Marcel Gagne is currently sporting his Oculus Go. And as usual, VR looks better to the beholder than it does to the beholden. So yeah, and right. Right, no, it's for anyone who's not seeing a VR headset, it's one of those things that straps to your face. But from what I hear, if you're wearing it for a little while, it can get kind of heavy, but pretty comfortable otherwise. But I will say that you're talking about the first interview that we'll do in VR. I'm looking into it. I mean, I'm currently working on my studio, and we're doing some renovations to it. Got to get some flooring in and things like that. But like when it's all said and done, I plan, instead of getting like a traditional webcam, I want to get a 360 camera, which work pretty well for VR. So it's not even like there's gonna be stuff happening over there, or there shouldn't be. But if people want to open the video, it would be like a YouTube video, open the video in 360, then they could look around the office and in the studio and kind of see what I got going on, either stuff to review or things like that. But it's coming. Content like that is coming. I just need to make it happen. I'm working on it. Like right now I have dirty dishes on the other side of the room, so I can't show that. But when it's all said and done, I'm going to have other things to look at. But either way, so that's in the future. By the way, speaking of the future and the past, if you missed any part of today's program, feel free to check out the podcast version of the show, which is today's show in its entirety, rebroadcast in wherever podcasts are heard. So SoundCloud, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, iTunes, Google Play, what have you. There you go. So, so let's go ahead and continue on past VR and talk about programming languages, because I'll be honest, this is kind of where like my computer expertise, like this is one of those things that like I started with C++. I started way back in like seventh. Yeah. And let's see, way back in like seventh grade, I learned Chipmunk Basic. I learned a little bit of HTML just to do some website stuff. Like I have dabblings in a lot, but I have mastery in none. So let's talk about programming languages. I should be a lot of help today.
For it. Hello world, as opposed to just typing PHP space, whatever it's called, hello world.cob or CBL or whatever extension you like, space, and of course the output name of the program that you want, and then you can run the final executable at that point. So it's wordy as it's wordy as all get out. It seems like a heck of a lot of work to do something really simple, but it's it's a possibility. And believe it or not, I mean, as old and ancient as this sounds, I think you could do worse than to, maybe learn a little COBOL if you actually want to do some contract programming work.
No, and that definitely makes sense. And like I'm reading this, and again, I have I have hello world knowledge of a couple of different languages. This one is a bit more complicated than the others, but at the same time, it's still pretty easy to understand, which is one of the reasons I really like technology, because when I was looking into what field I kind of wanted to get into, like you look into medicine, and it's like the roots of medicine go all the way back to like ancient Greece, ancient Greece, and you have to learn like Latin, and you have to go 2,000 years back. Technology, though, it was only developed in like the past 20, 30, 40 years. So it's not that hard to kind of put two and two together and figure out where their heads were when they were designing the language. So COBOL, pretty good. I mean, it's not and like you said, it's not Python. I mean, Python is well regarded as one that they could compile like anything with Python. Like you can be really sloppy with Python.
Also Python is, you can just run Python code. You don't have to actually compile it. It's not like C or C++ where you have to compile it. I mean, it's actually an interpreted language. Interpreted means that you've got source code that you can just run. It's visible, you can just run it. Whereas with like your COBOL program or your C++ program, you actually have to compile it, and then you run the binary, as we call it. So,
right,
it's a different philosophy.
Yeah, different philosophy, but yeah, like I said, you mentioned that you don't know if how long they're going to keep this for, and I think much like in the United States with the with the aging infrastructure. As long as it works, there's a very low priority to update it for no reason. So, man, and I've heard stories of like companies that will contract people who have retired, but they're the only ones who know how to work not only their language, but their system in particular, that they'll contract them out of retirement for like $200,000, for like a job. And it's like, man, I bet they would love someone who is just entering the workforce that could maintain this for 20 years. And I bet you the guy retiring would love a night of sleep because they're tired of getting the calls too.
Honestly, I know it sounds insane, but like I was primary support for several years on the COBOL compiler. And when we were having this discussion over probably a little bit too much wine, but when we were having this discussion, I'm sitting there going, I could probably get back into COBOL pretty quickly. I mean, I was really good at it. At one point, I thought, wow.
Hey, as long as you can make those connections, I have no doubt that that's where a lot of money is at. But anywho, COBOL, you have that there, and very, very cool. So why don't we go ahead, because we're running out of seconds.
I know. We digress so much. Let's talk about backups just very quickly because the distribution focus, interestingly enough, I actually have a link to a video that covers both my distributions, and I talk about Lucky Backup in it. So let's talk about backups just for fun. So let me just ask you a question. All right, you're going to be honest with me. All right.
Sure.
Do you back up your system regularly?
I do, but I don't. But I don't do it well. I back it up to like a different hard drive on the same computer. So it's not great, but it's something.
No offsite backup? No.
No cloud, no offsite. I should, but I don't. Yeah.
I'm kind of all in on the whole cloud thing. Not to the absence of everything else. I mean, I do have actual local backup as well,
right,
in a network drive, and in fact, I back up my PC to my local network drive. I don't back up my PC to another drive on my PC. I use the network drive for that. And
even before we get started, I will say that as the months go by, I will say it's getting a little less paramount in my mind as time goes by, because so much of what I do is done in the cloud. Like either I'm doing it, at this point, I would say Google's my backup. I do everything in like some kind of Chrome, Google kind of thing, and I don't really keep a lot of important documents on my computer.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I'm kind of amazed at how many documents that I actually edit in Google Docs or in Google Drive or something like that. So yeah, Google is kind of like my backup. So two things here. A, Google, you can never go out of business. And B, God, I hope they're not evil.
Right.
Yes, I know. I say that all the time. God, I hope Google isn't evil. But I really hope they're not evil.
And let us digress for even like a couple or like a minute or two. I mean, you were talking about free and open source, blah blah blah. That's something that we talk about here on the show quite often. Google, revealed that they were working on a search engine specifically for China, because Google is not really allowed in China because of their I don't want to say human rights violations, but their human rights violations.
Go ahead, say it.
Yeah, exactly. But Google's whole do no evil that I think they dropped to do the right thing. I feel like Google didn't get enough backlash for them, making a censored version of their platform for China. And so that's just, you say, I hope Google isn't evil. I think Google's showing some leniency on what is, what's good and what's evil.
Oh, I'm in agreement with you on this. I don't like that idea at all. I don't like that following the corporate line allows you to, and I know that companies do this all the time. Okay, this isn't a Google thing. I mean, companies do this all the time. It's like you sort of look the other way on certain things to when it comes to getting the contract somewhere. Like, for instance, if you've been following the news, and by the way, this is not complete. We may have to revisit a couple of things, because I want to digress a little bit further here and talk about how far we can push the open source philosophy in the real world. And since you opened this can of worm with Google,
sure,
let's just take this one step further. Right now, Canada is in a battle of words. It's actually more of a battle of words with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is pulling their people. They sent our ambassador home. They ordered their foreign students to come back to Saudi Arabia. They canceled all new contracts with Canada, all sorts of things. And in my opinion, it's kind of like good riddance. Of all the places in the world that couldn't possibly have a worse human rights record, that nonetheless countries like Canada and the United States are constantly kissing up to, Saudi Arabia is like at the top of that list. I mean, like it is way past time.
And then
to call a spade on this one.
And then, in the same token, admittedly, I don't keep an eye on Canada because they are one of those countries that's like, they're Canada. What are they going to do? And then, they kind of flip around on Canada and they kind of call them out on it. And it's just like, well, Canada. Is Saudi Arabia really calling out Canada on their human rights violations? But wow, we have totally strayed from Linux and that kind of thing. So let's talk about backups.
Yeah,
Why'd you mention backups?
We haven't strayed 100%. Now, the reason that I mention that is one of the things that open source software can let us do, and the open source philosophy applied to business in general can let us do, is actually live outside of those constraints. If we could figure out a way to sort of walk away from the profit motive a little bit, as open source has allowed people to do for a long, long time now, and develop technology and develop software without having to worry about whether or not you can pay the bills at the end of the month, I think the world could be a vastly better place. Give you an example. there's no reason whatsoever in today's world that we couldn't create a distributed federated system where basically, people have systems in different cities. Having a central mega giant may be the way that we've always done things, like a central mega Facebook or a central mega Google or a central mega, power generation facility. But what would really make sense is if you generated power at clean locations in and around cities and in and around places without having to push it, across hundreds and thousands of miles. It would make a heck of a lot more sense if the internet wasn't going through the backbones of several major corporate hubs, but could be generated and supported by basically points of presence in various neighborhoods and so forth, by people opening it up. Like, there's no reason why we couldn't have a completely open internet. There's no in today's world. I mean, we have the technology, we have the possibilities. Every one of us has got a bloody supercomputer in our pockets. It should be possible to do something like that using federated DNS, using federated, social networks. Like, for instance, there are alternatives to Twitter. Mastodon is actually an alternative to Twitter that allows you to connect to servers. Like, even if you're not on the central Mastodon server, you can still communicate and chat with people on other Mastodon servers, which are federated around the world. You can do that with Friendica, which does the same thing that Facebook does, without being tied to a central place. If we could somehow, as a society, have the appetite for these open distributed systems without this ridiculous mentality of, so who's going to win the social network war? Who's going to win the browser war? Who's going to win the OS war? Who's going to win the cell phone war? This is ridiculous. It's completely ridiculous, because it ties us to a central place, and it makes it so that if the companies that we attach ourselves to, whether it's Facebook, hey, I use Facebook, I use Google and so forth, but when they do bad things, okay, or when they do things that are questionable, privacy concerns anybody, okay, we have no other place to go. We are stuck because we are in this mentality, this winner-take-all mentality. And what the open source world has, and what the open source philosophy, the open source ideology, however you want to look at it, what it has going for it is that there is another way, and there is another place, and there are more people, and there are more companies. And you know what? The technology is not central to Google. It's not central to Facebook. It's not central to any of these places. We can all do this stuff. Okay. Yeah. And I know I sound like a preacher at this point, but damn it, we're at a point in history where we should be able to do this.
Well, and we have, and unfortunately, it's been given a scary name, a bad name, and admittedly, there are bad parts of it. But when you talk about things like, let's say, the dark web, the dark web isn't really about the dark. It's not really about back alleys or things like that. It's about people running websites off of their own computers that are not categorized by Google, and people think Google is the internet. No, there's a lot of, the internet that you can find that, it's just people running, I don't know, their own IP camera that they don't want connected to anyone else, or they're running their own game server. Like and of course, so the dark web has a bad name to it, but you're talking about decentralization. You're talking about like the Open Internet Project. There's people making strides, but I'm sure that you also read the news just a couple of just a little while ago. Apple became the first $1 trillion valued company.
I know.
It shows that when you rope people in and you close them in and put up walls and doors, it's very lucrative. So it is lucrative, but I this is one of the reasons that I like to do this with you on a monthly basis. It's the reason that I do my YouTube show, my Cooking with Linux YouTube show. I want to keep trying to get the message out there that there is an alternative, there is another way. Despite, I admitted it. I love Google. I use them extensively. I have an Android phone, but that doesn't mean that I think that it is the only way and the best way. And remember, Google is built on open source. Facebook is built on open source. The internet is built on open source. Without open source and the open source philosophy and open development and open standards, none of these things would exist.
you know, and we can do it better if only we as a society can separate ourselves from this, like I said, this winner take all mentality, and just, you know, start building a better open world, open government, open standards, open internet, open medicine, open hardware, open everything.
It's very anti the system that got us here, but I know where you're coming from. I know where it inevitably will lead to. And I will say, Marcel, that I'm going to ask you for something a little weird here. Would you mind if we go like an extra 10 minutes? You know, just for everyone out there. And I know we're we're supposed to be kind of capping off here, but would you mind going for another 10 minutes? Just so we can get some backup. Perfect. So,
where do you want to go on this extra 10 minutes?
This extra 10 minutes. I actually
hijacked the last 10 minutes.
No, it's perfectly fine. And I think that, you know, this is a point that comes up, you know, kind of, every now and again here on the show with us, but I like having it. It's a good point. But also, I wanted to get back to the backup and lucky backup and what you kind of found out there, because, like you just said, I'm not too good here, and I think a lot of people are just like me. Like we I even say on the show all the time, backup. Don't back up anything you don't care, or at least whatever you don't back up, you don't care enough to have in the future. So. Talk about Lucky Backup and why this one kind of grabbed your attention.
Okay. Well, first of all, there's a protocol called Oursink in the open source world, in the Linux world, and Oursink literally is kind of like remote synchronization. So you synchronize this file system over here with that file system over there, and to put it as simply as possible, it's like you can say Oursink this, and we'll call it a drive, to use your example, to the drive that you've got there, Oursink this drive to that drive. And what it will do is it will copy all the files over the first time, but the second time it will just copy over the files that have changed. Okay, so if what you're trying to do is you're trying to create a mirror, which is I think what you're trying to do with having that second drive in your PC, right? Oursink will, instead of copying the whole drive, Oursink will just copy what's changed. So if you go, and I'm just going to use letters, or /drive1/drive2. So if you go Oursink /drive1 /drive2, everything in drive 1 is going to get copied to drive 2 exactly as it is in drive 1. And if you do it again and you've only changed one file, it's just going to copy one file over. So Oursink is really, really cool that way. Oursink also has a flag called you can put -- delete. And what will happen then is, because right now all that happens is if I change a file, it gets changed over here. But if I delete a file on this side, it's not going to delete the file on the second side. Okay, right. So if what I'm trying to do is create a mirror of my drive, basically either on a NAS or on a separate drive or on a separate file system for that matter. If I want it to be exact, I'm going to put that -- delete. And if I delete a file on this side, it's going to delete the file on that side. And that's great because then I really have an honest to God mirror of my drive at that point. And if you are actually using two physical drives in your PC, then conceivably you could just swap them if disaster strikes from one to the other, right? Right. So now, what Lucky Backup is Oursink, okay? And Oursink can be scripted so that it runs at scheduled time, so you don't actually have to sit there and type it. It'll run at scheduled time so that you don't have to worry about it, whether it's 2 times a day or 3 times a day or just once at midnight or whatever. It just backs up the files that haven't changed. Lucky Backup is a graphical version of all that. There are lots of things that I could throw onto the command line using Oursink to tell it to, for instance, ignore a particular folder or only take these particular folders and back those up. So there are a lot of additional things, and of course I might want to timestamp them as well. I might want to have backups that change like once a week or something like that. With something like Lucky Backup, you've got this nice graphical environment. You don't have to remember any of that stuff, and it takes care of all of it. Once you've set it up, you can also create a schedule. Again, point and click. I want Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I don't really care about Saturday or Sunday because I'm not working, and I want that backup to happen at these particular times. And in fact, in Lucky Backup, you can create as many what they call projects as you want. And I think I've got a screenshot in the show notes there. Yeah. So you can create. Excuse me, you can, they call them tasks as opposed to projects. I'm looking at my screenshot here. They call them tasks. So you can create tasks, as many as you want, to back up, like for instance, at different times. Like, so that let's say that there is a folder where you're, if you're a writer, for instance, like me, and you're continually making changes, you might want that folder that has, your writing backed up on more of a regular basis, like every 10, instead of once a day, 10 times a day, whatever it might happen to be. So, or like a friend of mine does every 10 minutes.
I believe it. And
every 10 minutes.
I mean, it's a weird thing, but I think it really replicates one of my favorite features of Google Docs, which kind of updates really almost as you type. It kind of saves it continuously, and I think having it update every 10 minutes, especially if you and like, was it? I've heard those stories of like doctoral students who are doing their their thesis. And they have one copy, they save it, and it gets deleted for some reason. The power goes out, or the file gets corrupt, and they lose, months worth of research in progress. It's like, those kinds of little backups are going to save you a lot of headaches. So I really like that, though. Individual files. That's man, that's really cool.
Well, the other thing that's kind of neat too is, we were talking about, Google or. You can actually, in this, specify a network drive. And like I said, I actually have a, it's hidden back here somewhere. I can't actually show it to you on camera, unfortunately. But I have two NASs. I have a Buffalo NAS, which was the first one that I got, which has 2 terabytes on it. Mm-hmm. And I have a 4 terabyte, what's the big drive company?
Seagate? Let's see, there's Seagate, there's Kingston. Yeah.
No, I think it's Seagate. It's the My Books or whatever they're called. Anyway, I have a 4 gigabyte one of those, which is actually hanging off of my network as well, and that's what I use for doing backups. So I have those guys, but I also back up to Google Drive as well. So I have like multiple sources that I do backups to, and honestly, I actually use Lucky Backup. I use Oursink files. Mm-hmm. But I have used Lucky Backup for quite a long time. I create tasks on the fly. The example that I use in there obviously doesn't show off my real stuff, but it's a lovely product. It's actually, Oursink will do it all for you. Okay. Right. But if you don't want to have to learn the ins and outs and scripting and so forth, great product. Highly recommended. Available for Linux. All the distributions have it in their repositories, or you can go to the Lucky Backup site on SourceForge and download a copy.
Yeah, there you go. And there's a link to that in the show notes. And I will say that that's one thing that even I rely on once in a while. This is the fact that some people just create software to do little things. Like, it's not going to be the one thing for everyone. But if you find yourself in that need, like I use FREAC, which is a video to audio converter, and it's just one guy with one project, and it suits my needs super well. And it's like this is the beauty.
Just because one person made it. Okay, it doesn't mean it's a bad thing.
No.
You can have a spectacular product created by a single individual that everybody relies on, and we forget that. We forget the power of the individual. And again, this is one of those great open source things. Not only do we all share in it, but the individual matters.
Right, they do, and hey, I have a couple programs that I couldn't do the show here without just those small individual companies. So, yeah, I will say that's great. We have just enough time if you want to. I was kind of get into some of these just distribution focuses and just kind of breeze right through them, just so people aren't confused.
Well, I'll walk you through it. Actually, I'm going to almost ignore the first one because I was going to point out that, and of course, I'm actually trying to go to the site now, and it isn't coming up for me, which actually makes me wonder. It was coming up because I actually downloaded it a few days ago, so it was working fine, but it's offline at the moment. GNUsense or GNUsense.org, GNUNEWSENSC.org. I found this one interesting only because it's based on Debian, but they've gone out of their way to make sure that proprietary drivers aren't there, proprietary codecs aren't there. So it's kind of a weird idea. It works. It works fine. It's a Debian-based desktop, but this reliance on only open source in this case means that it may not be suitable for absolutely everyone else. But if you want to see if you want to see the state of something that exists that is, strictly based on what you can get open without anything else, that might be something to take a look at. But the other thing too, and the other thing that I want to look at, which might be fun, which would be great fun to close in on. Okay. Sure. Is this whole notion you said one guy. Now I don't know if this next one is one guy or whether it's a group of people, but it also introduced me to a concept. Somebody told me about this, and then I went and Googled it. I confess I didn't know that this existed, but we won't define it. But we will leave it for the listeners and the viewers to go and Google it themselves. Bronies.
I've heard of them. Yeah.
Somebody asked, or somebody when I was showing this off said, "Oh, this would be a great operating system for bronies," and then I had to go and check this out. So it's an interesting subgroup that I was not aware of, but I'll let people go and check that one out for themselves. But we're going to wrap up today on a free and open source operating system, which uses a lot of GNU tools, a lot of open source tools, and apparently they spun their own kernel. Okay. One of the things we forget when I do this, when we have this conversation, is that, we talk about Linux distributions because they are collections of open source software that use the Linux kernel basically as the brain, as the heart that drives the hardware, that talks to all the programs, that basically makes everything work and talk to each other. That's what the kernel is. And we forget that that's actually, what's at the heart of it. And people have created other kernels, like, for instance, the Free Software Foundation, or the GNU Foundation, I should say, has worked for years to create something called HURD, H-U-R-D, as an alternative to Linux. Needless to say, it hasn't caught on. Okay, but this next operating system is called Pony OS, P-O-N-Y-O-S.
Makes perfect sense if you see the screenshot. It really does.
And it's based on My Little Pony, My Little Pony, My Little Pony, the TV show, the cartoon show. Mm-hmm. And it's like a pony themed operating system. They wrote their own kernel. They, or he or she, or whoever the mad person is behind this, wrote their own kernel for this operating system. And they even have a package manager so that you can actually install other games. Like the screenshot shows Doom. Remember Doom? The shoot 'em up?
The original, the OG, yes, Doom, of course.
The original Doom.
Very nice juxtaposition between Doom, which is a very bloody horror first-person shooter, with My Little Pony and cartoon equine flying everywhere. So yeah.
It's I don't know. There's something both wonderful and insane about it at the same time. And it actually works and works quite well. I'm not
you actually
sure
installed it. Did you install it, or did you just watch the video?
I actually installed it. You know what I should do? I should run it. I should do like a 5-minute video of it, put it up on YouTube, and see if maybe you can posthumously attach it to the show notes, or maybe for next time or something like that. But give it a little tour of Pony OS, because it's like it's strangely wonderful and insane all at the same time. And again, I there's no way that I could possibly recommend this as your daily driver, as your operating system to run things on. But it just shows what you can do if you have access to lots of cool open source software. And you have time to kill.
You know what? I think right there we're going to start some music so that we can wrap up the show. But I will say that Marcel, if you do that, you are going to open yourself up to an entirely new audience. So hey, maybe that's worth doing. So So with these last minute here, I'll let you go ahead and say, if people want to find out more about you, your musings, your writings, where can they go?
You can go to cookingwithlinux.com is one place. Although if you go to www.youtube.com/freethinkeratlarge, all one word, FREETHINKERATLARGE, you can find my videos, my Cooking with Linux videos, and some of my gaming videos as well, because I'm a little bit of a gamer as well. And that's available on YouTube. Or if you want to find me on Twitter and you want to find out what sorts of brain droppings, as George Carlin once referred to them, wind up in my stream. You can go to twitter.com/WFTL. And let's face it, I'm all over the place. I do stuff for Linux Journal. I'm doing stuff for LPI, the Linux Professional Institute, which is a certification and training organization for Linux professionals. I'm all over the place. So again, but if you go to youtube.com/freethinker@large or twitter.com/WFTL, that's probably a good place to pick up on what I'm doing.
Very, very cool. And again, links to that in the show notes. Glad that you are keeping yourself busy when you're not on vacation. And thank you for doing the show here with us today. So until next month, Marcel, thank you so much, and catch you then.
All right, you take care out there, all right?
All right, have a great one. And everyone else out there, thank you for tuning into Computer America. Been a lot of fun. And be sure to catch us next time. And cheers, everyone. Computer America, signing off. Bye, everyone.